Welcome to the You Can Make a Living in the Music Industry podcast from Nashville, Tennessee. I am your host, John Martin Keith. Celebrities, working class musicians, and people who work behind the scenes in all areas of the music industry will share their stories, encourage you, and give practical advice of ways you can make a living doing what you love in the music industry. This episode is brought to you by Edenbrook Productions. Edenbrook Productions is the company I founded to help musicians grow in their craft. Are you a songwriter, but maybe you've been told your songs aren't quite there yet? Or are your songs ready, but you don't feel stage ready? Or maybe music is your passion, but you feel imprisoned by your day job and you don't know what to do next to make your dream a reality? Well, Edenbrook Productions is here to help. We offer consulting services via phone call, Skype, and FaceTime. And for the You Can Make a Living in the Music Industry podcast listeners, we're offering an introductory 1-hour consultation special. Click on the link in the show notes to contact me, and let's get you making a living in the music industry. Hey everybody, welcome back, and thank you so much for joining us again today. We're going to continue part 2 of our conversation with Elizabeth Chan as we focus on road managing in the music business. In addition to drumming, you're tour managing.
That's right.
Now, at what point after moving to Nashville did you get into the tour managing side of things?
Yeah, well, it was about 4 months after moving to Nashville and 4 months after being on the gig with Mariah, actually, that her road manager moved on. And they kind of pulled me aside and said, hey, you're detail-oriented. Why don't you just jump into this for a little bit and see how you like it. So I took on that hat for a bit of time, and eventually it wasn't something that came naturally to me, but it was something that I really enjoyed getting to be a part of the communication process in advancing shows, just being able to work with different people even work with the promoters on a different level and work with management on a different level that, for a lot of musicians, they don't get that interaction. And so coming into that, there were, once again, a lot of things that I had to learn about it, because when I first moved to Nashville, I didn't even know what a road manager did. It was, 4 months of me observing what Bethany, the road manager for Mariah, had done, and then once I jumped into it, I really was just like, all right, let's try to figure this all out. And Mariah's manager was kind enough to give me pointers throughout that whole thing, but yeah, it was basically just doing it from one gig, learning a couple of things there, bringing that to the next gig, trying to see how I could improve the processes there and continuing to build on that.
So walk us through, for people who don't know what a road manager does, what does a day in the life of a road manager look like?
Yeah, so for a road manager, the work really begins weeks before you ever show up to the gig. Oftentimes about 4 to 6 weeks out, you'll begin your first process of reaching out to the promoter, or the promoter will have reached out to you, and you just start working through all the details that are required for a show, whether that be backline gear, whether that be hotels, travel, ground transportation once you get there. You're basically working through all of these different travel logistics so that by the time you get to the show, everything already should have been sorted out. And I think, too, for me, having a dual role of drumming and tour managing, the advancement side of things is even that much more important, because... So
what do you mean by advancing a show? What, for a listener who doesn't know what that means, what does that mean?
Yeah, so the advancement, basically, booking all the things, having all the travel sorted, having the schedule for the show. Because I'm doing 2 roles, really the advancement part of things needs to be very finely tuned by the time I get there. Because if anything comes up on the drumming side of things, and oftentimes I'm also dealing with the tracks for the artist, sometimes I'm band leading for the artist, and so, making sure that I can check off everything on the list before I get there, or as many things as I can check off before I get there, is super important to me. And when you do that advancement work, thoroughly, by the time you get to the show, really everything should just kind of run as clockwork. You're going to be dealing with, making sure that dressing rooms and that type of thing are set up and ready to go. Even working with coordinating, sometimes, there are travel things that come up, like say you have a delayed flight or you have a canceled flight, and at that point you have to really work on your feet to come up with different plan and make sure that everyone is in communication on it. When things like that happen, I think communication is the biggest asset to a tour manager. At that point, you're wanting to bring in management so that they're aware of what's happening with the artist, because it really can affect the artist financially when travel things come up. And also, you're wanting to keep in touch with the promoter to let them know, hey, this is what's taking place. We're still on our way to you, but here's the timeline of things, because even on their end, they're having to adjust sound check times. They're having to adjust possibly even show times. So communication is really important in that whole process.
That's cool. For me as an artist, I'm also my road manager.
Right.
I'm the artist, and I'm the road manager, and I'm the manager, the artist manager, and I'm the booking agent. So I mean, like for myself, I do everything. So I recently, just a couple months ago, flew to California for a show that I booked, and so I was flying out and had a layover. Second plane got canceled. As I got on the plane for the first plane I got on, before it even took off, got a text saying that the second flight was canceled, and I wasn't going to be able to fly out until the next night, which is when my show was going to be going. So I got to Denver, where the flight was canceled, and was scrambling and having to get all of this stuff figured out. Right. I'm on the phone, and I'm having to make phone calls. And here's what's happening. I'm going to have to rent a car and drive 19 hours all night long to get to the venue to make sure I could actually play the show. And I got it all worked out. But, that logistical nightmare of when a flight cancels and your show is in jeopardy, and they've already sent you money.
Absolutely.
You've got obligations to fulfill, and you want to fulfill. It's like, I can't just cancel and turn around and go home. I got to figure this out. And so that's what you're having to deal with, every time.
And when you're working with band and crew, I mean, you have sometimes 5 to 12 to however many people on a gig. When flights get canceled, you're talking change fees and all of that multiplied by however many people you have.
Yeah.
And so it really, at that point, you're making a financial call for the artist as well, and you're wanting to be aware of how much is this going to cost them? Is this even in budget? Is there a better option here? Like, for instance, what you did with renting a car, at a certain point, sometimes that, although it's painful to do that, sometimes that is the best option. And you have to make those calls and be decisive on the spot.
And you make that decision for them.
Right.
Right?
Right, absolutely. And of course, I mean, for me, I really, really lean into management as well. Like, I really think the job of tour manager is in direct partnership with management.
With artist management.
Right. Exactly. So I want to make sure that I have a great relationship with the managers that I work with just as much as the artists, because at the end of the day, I'm making decisive calls on things with them.
Right.
And you have to be on the same page, or else a lot of times, like, man, if I make a call for thousands of dollars for that artist and the manager doesn't agree, it's pretty much job over for me, right?
Right.
So you want to make sure that you have that open relationship with that artist manager, so that at any point that you're on the road, at any time of the day, you can call that person and say, hey, this is what I'm encountering. Can you jump on the computer for me and look at things with me?
Okay. Does that happen very often?
It doesn't happen very often, but I would say, the moments that it does happen, you're typically you have 30 minutes to make a decision. Okay. It typically ends up being that way.
And it usually gets itself worked out, though, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You have to figure out something to do, because there's a lot of jobs on the line.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are times when you can even communicate with the promoter. I mean, I remember one time where our flights were crazy. We woke up at 4 that morning, and we were supposed to catch a flight in Richmond, and that airport got completely flooded. Completely flooded. We were supposed to play a show in Ohio that night, and there was no way. It first started with a delay notification, and you just kept getting delayed. Finally, it's 7 o'clock, and we're realizing this storm is about to basically keep us in Richmond. We're not going to get out unless we come up with something quick. And so came up with the idea to switch the flights to DC and make the drive there. But the storm was so bad that everyone was booking out rental cars. So I contacted our guitarist's dad. He was living in the area. And I was like, hey, I know this sounds crazy because it's storming outside. Like, it was to the point where the airport shuttle from the hotel to the airport actually got flooded and started lifting off the ground.
Oh, goodness.
Like, the flood was just really bad. But our guitarist's dad came through, picked me up, and we decided to drive probably 30, 45 minutes inland. And we got to this rental place where it literally was the last rental car that they had. We asked, do you have any SUVs here? And the guy goes, this is crazy because in our system, I don't even see a rental car left, but there happens to be one in the lot. I'll let you have it. So we took that rental car, picked up the band, and immediately started making our way to Washington, D.C. We had already switched our flights, trying to get that way. Hit a ton of traffic. We missed our flights there. And I'm like, okay, the next best option is Baltimore. So we drive on to Baltimore, eventually make our flights there. But by this point, we've completely missed sound check. I'm speaking with the promoter, and he's like, you're going to miss your set time too. I've asked all of the other bands on this bill whether they'd be willing to let you move your set time to right before the headliner. And thankfully, after communicating with all the management companies involved, all the artists involved, he got the go-ahead to let us move our set to right before the headliner. So we show up, we literally pull up, and it's like, all right, you've got 15 minutes till stage.
Gosh. Plug in and go.
Right, plug in and go. Get your gear on stage, and you're just going to have to do the show blindly. You know, we have a basic monitor mix set up for you, but you just got to go for it. And it's in those moments where you're like, all right, you know, there are contracts on the line. There are different agreements that have been already set in motion. And we can't just because the travel day is tough, we can't just pull out of it, you know. So those are probably the trickiest moments where you're having to be on your toes communicating to everyone.
Yeah. So you have to be a tour manager, a road manager, you have to have good communication skills. So that's something that the audience needs to know.
Yeah.
If somebody wants to do this for a living, you have to have good communication with people, and you have to have a good personality. You have to, again, coming back to relationships, you have to be able to relate to people and talk to people and be able to problem solve, troubleshoot on the spot. And there's a lot of pressure doing that. And wow, it's stressing me out just a little bit just to listen. And I do tour managing, and I'm like, man, I haven't come across that to that level. It's good to know that you're able to work those things out, and that people are willing to let you move, because that's a big deal, to let an artist move kind of up the chain of opening acts, especially when you have multiple acts.
Yeah.
You know, if you're supposed to be the first band of 4,
right?
You know, and because each band is for people to know, usually it's, you know, an artist comes out, and then a bigger artist comes out, and then a bigger artist comes out, and then you got the big headliner next.
Absolutely.
So for 2 bands to say, yeah, we're going to let you be after us instead of before us, that says a lot about them, for one, and their management to let you do that.
Yeah.
So that's really, really cool.
Yeah, and that's where good relationships are, you know, involved as well. Like, that's where it really comes into play, because if you were a jerk to these other artists prior, you know, chances are when you're in a bind like that, things aren't going to work as smoothly. But if they trust you, if they know, hey, you're going to keep to your set time, and hey, you know, you're in a tough situation, but we've seen you at other shows before, we trust that you can be a professional about this and step on stage and pull off a good show, you know, they're way more willing at that point to say, sure, we'll work this out, and we'll all agree to have this be in your favor so that you can actually do your show and fulfill your contract.
Yeah. I think the moral of the story as a musician in that situation is know your stuff. That's where it comes back to know what you're doing, you know, practicing all the time, making sure you know what you're playing, how to play your instrument well, so that because when you get put in that position, hey, you got 15 minutes to set up and play in front of thousands of people, you don't get a sound check, it's just plug in and go. You've got to be able to do it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're in bad shape, you know, so that comes back to that. So who have you worked with as a tour manager? Who are some of the artists you've worked with?
Yeah, so I tour managed with Ellie Holcomb.
Okay.
I tour managed with Holland. Right now I'm on the road with a girl named Abby Anderson, who I'm drumming and tour managing for.
Okay. And that's she's opening for? Who's she opening for?
So we actually just did a tour with Rob Thomas.
Okay. Oh, that's right. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and then she has a couple of shows coming up that she's just doing one-offs for.
Okay.
But yeah, so the tour that we just finished was opening up for Rob Thomas, and that was a 70-day, like, I think it was 44, 45 shows that we ended up doing total.
And is that like a dream come true, getting to play with Rob Thomas?
Oh my gosh, it was so cool. And his entire crew, everyone that he had on the road was just incredible. And I think, it's fun to see someone like him who has been a part of Matchbox 20. He still has Matchbox 20 going. And, he's done it all and still is the kindest human being on the planet.
That's cool.
Like, he's the type of guy that, isn't just stuck on his bus. He isn't just hiding out somewhere or removed from his crew or from the opener or from the people that are on the road. He's just so engaged with everyone, and I loved getting to see that and learn from him in that regard.
That's cool. So with Abby Anderson, she's got some shows coming up, because you and I had this interview scheduled for a few days from now.
Right.
I think next week we were supposed to do this.
Right.
And then you text, it's like, hey, can we maybe move
Right.
This to today, because I've got to go out on the road and open up for...
Well,
can you not say?
I actually can't even say.
You can't even say. Oh, okay, then I know a secret and I won't say it.
Right. It's actually, so the reason why that came up so last minute is because it was a secret show that came through.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, I will keep the secret.
Okay. Well,
I love knowing... That's one of the fun things about getting to do stuff like this is
Right.
like you get little tidbits of information that are behind the scenes. And
Absolutely.
So that's cool. Well, I'm excited for what you're getting ready to do.
Thank you.
And by the time that people get to hear this interview, it will be out to the world and people will already know about that.
Right.
So, but it'll be fun for them to find out.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to someone that wants to be a drummer or a tour manager? Because those are the two biggest things that you do. Is there anything else that you do outside of in the music business? Are those the two kind of things that you focus on? But that's a full-time. That's full-time. One of them's full-time.
Yeah.
I mean, just drumming is a full-time gig for you, right?
Right.
So by adding tour managing on top of that, you've got yourself two full-time gigs that you're doing. So let me ask you this. I don't want specifics, but as far as, okay, you're getting paid by artists or artist management to be a drummer, right? And that's a good gig. And then when you go out and now all of a sudden you're going to be tour managing that same artist, that's a separate paycheck, correct?
Right.
That's an additional, paycheck for you. And so sometimes you're doing both of those jobs for one artist, or you might be doing drumming for one artist and tour managing another artist. Now, do you ever drum for one artist and road manage for another artist at the same time? Like are you drumming on one gig and at the same time when you're not on the stage, are you road managing from a computer on a phone for somebody else?
Right. I've done that in the past, and I've just learned that is not the most ideal situation for me. It's just a little bit too much to cover, especially when I'm on the road with one artist and then trying to sort out details. Like, for instance, if things go perfectly as planned, it's great. But if any hiccups come up, that's where I'm spread too thin.
Yeah.
And so I've done that in the past. But another part of it too was just I realized being present with one thing and being present with one group of people is super important. And for me, I'm someone who, if I don't feel like I've shown up with, for instance, you sitting here, and I walk out of this room, I'm going to feel bad for the fact that I didn't have my full attention here. And so even just for my own mental well-being, I'm like, I need to know when to limit myself and when to set boundaries so that I am fully showing up in the space that I'm currently in.
Right.
So yeah, eventually, it got to the point where I just decided I'm not making the best use of my skills or even my time by spreading myself so thin. So I ended up giving up. I used to do advancement for other artists while being on the road with another artist. And at this point, I just kind of have made it a decision in my mind that I won't do more than 2 jobs on the road. That's the first thing. So if I'm drumming and tour managing, there's no way I'm doing merch. Like, it's just not, I've been asked to do that in the past. Or for instance, if I'm drumming and tour managing, I'm not going to also band lead. Or I'll drum and band lead and not tour manage, Right. Just finding the limit where, it works well, and then finding the limit where, okay, now I'm definitely over the line. It's been really important for me to just understand those boundaries.
What advice would you give to someone that wants to be a drummer or a tour manager? Not necessarily both, but either or. What's some advice that you would want to give to them that are starting out, wanting to move to Nashville or LA or Chicago or New York, any of the big cities? And I think that's one of the main things is if you're going to do this, you need to be in one of these cities because that's where the work is.
Right.
That's where you build relationships and make connections with people. You were from New York, so there's an advantage there because you're already from there. There's a lot of stuff happening there. But if you're not from one of these big cities where music takes place, these meccas of music, then it's a lot harder to find that kind of work because it's not where the hub is, right?
Right.
So what would you say to someone that wants to get into this kind of stuff?
I feel like I could answer this from multiple perspectives, like either from the financial side or even from the logistics side of moving. One, I would definitely recommend moving. Like you said, you have to be in this area. You have to be able to get to the call. For instance, if someone finds out about you like, hey, I heard that you're a drummer in town or really need someone last minute, that is your opportunity to jump in. So you want to be available first of all. And then from a financial perspective too, I know that's a concern for a lot of people who are considering the move. They're like, well, I don't have a gig lined up, and if I jump into a job, I'm not going to have the availability to take any gigs, so why would I even move there if I don't have the availability? To that, I say you really have to be smart about how you go about dealing with the finances, but then also keeping your availability. If you're looking for something that's flexible, there are so many options here in Nashville, especially because a lot of people understand musicians who are part-time. And there are a lot of jobs that will be flexible with that schedule. For me, when I first moved, I wasn't full-time doing drumming. I didn't have enough gigs to maintain, paying for rent and all of these other things. And so I took up a part-time job actually at a fitness club where from, I think it was about 9 to 1 on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday when I wasn't traveling, I had hours at this fitness club where I would, check in. There would be like a mad rush in the morning of people checking in. And then once people checked in, that job actually gave me the flexibility to sit in front of a computer and I could either read or I could send out emails. So as long as I got those responsibilities done in the morning, I was then free to contact managers, to send out emails, to make calls, do whatever I needed to do for the music side of what I was trying to accomplish. So just really being smart in chasing down the right fit for getting an income while also creating flexibility for yourself, I think is a really important thing to learn and to take into your move to Nashville. And then the second thing that I would recommend is when you move, obviously you're working on a tight budget, as you're trying to build up your career with gigs and that sort of thing. A common mistake that I find a lot of people make is as things increase, like as you have more shows, as your income increases, a lot of people then have their spending increase. It's like your income has exponentially increased, and at the same time your spending has exponentially increased. And I think one of the things that is a really wise practice is as your income increases, allow your savings to exponentially increase, because as a musician, you don't have a steady income. There are going to be times where it's like thousands of shows all at once, and then the next season it's going to be, oh, I didn't get a tour, and so I'm stringing together one-offs, and it's in those moments where you want to have that consistent, you almost want to think of it as you're salarying yourself. You're putting yourself on a salary, and through the year you're having an even flow of cash. Whatever you bring in, it's not that you have suddenly $10,000 that you can blow in one sitting just because you got a tour that was $10,000, and so I think that's a really important practice as well. And then eventually too, because being self-employed as a musician is very different from working for a company, I think it also helps you set aside income and money for things that eventually, like as you move into different stages of life too, like say getting married and starting a family, wanting to buy a house, wanting to invest in different things for retirement, those are all aspects that you have to think about for yourself when you're self-employed.
Yes, I would also add to not be in debt.
Absolutely.
To get out of debt. I can't recommend Dave Ramsey enough
Yes.
to people, because if you are in debt and you have a bunch of credit cards, and you're always, every time you get paid for something, you're just having to pay off some credit card or some bill or whatever, you can never get ahead. So I always encourage people to get out of debt as quickly as possible. And again, like you're saying, save, because there's never a steady gig for very long. It's very rare. They're out there, but they're usually the long-term, George Strait and Garth Brooks and those types of gigs where, people have worked with them for years and years and years, but those are far and few between nowadays.
Absolutely.
So it's like you get a tour, you get to go out and play for someone for a few months or a year, maybe 2 years, and then that might be over, and then you got to find something else. So if you're always able to be working on something off to the side, so that when that thing is over, you can automatically work into this other thing. So I think it's what's great about you with your drumming. Then you're also tour managing. You've got multiple streams of income, and that's one of the purposes of this show, is to let people know that you can make a living in the music industry through multiple streams of income. It's not just one thing that you are doing. It can be one thing. If you can do that full time, that's great. But for most of us, you can't. You've got to have more than one thing.
Absolutely.
So if you can string along those things that are all musically related, and it doesn't always have to be on the creative side. You're also, like the tour managing, that's a business. That's purely business side of music.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
But you're in the thick of it, though, and you're helping make sure that the artist is able to put on a show and do it well for the audience. And
let me add to that too. I think it's important to evaluate when it's time to let go of one of those things.
Sure.
For me, I mentioned about having that part-time job, and eventually it got to the point where I was traveling so much that they said, hey, we're actually letting you go because you are now a full-time musician working a part-time job.
Right.
So they were kind enough to recognize for me that, hey, you have enough gigs at this point. Like, you're having to call out of work because you're actually doing what you set out to do. You're actually doing what you got this job so that you could create your flexibility to do,
Right.
So I think at that point it's important to evaluate, is this side hustle that I have actually pulling me away from committing to the things that I actually want to do,
Right.
the main focus, and I've had to ask myself that question when it comes to these other gigs, even within music. At that time I was working for that fitness club, but even with things like tour managing or merchandise or band leading, if it gets to a certain point where one of those things is no longer serving the main passion of drumming, which I consider is the top priority for me, I have to evaluate at that point whether the extra income is actually worthwhile or whether it's holding me back from actually diving full into the thing that I love doing. And the thing that eventually, I want to pour into that one thing so that leads to a bigger opportunity,
Yeah.
So I think being wise about, when is it time to buckle down and do the work, and then when is it time to evaluate and say, this is actually pulling away. Those are good questions to ask.
Sure. Yeah, I was in that same situation years ago. I was delivering pizzas, and I did that for about 6 years. And then I started teaching guitar. I started a teaching business, and I had to, I was touring part-time as an artist, and playing out for other artists while I was delivering pizzas, and it was very flexible. That was the whole point, is they let me go whenever I need to, and I could come back and work, and I had a job. But then I started teaching guitar and started my own business doing that, and then that got to the point that I finally realized one day, I was like, I've got enough work as a teacher that I don't have to deliver pizzas any longer, and I can still go out and tour. And then on the weekends, or if at camps or whatever, but during the week, I've got enough students I can teach guitar, and so now all of a sudden I went from part-time music, part-time whatever else, to full-time music doing 3 or 4 different things.
Exactly.
You know, and so that's what we're trying to get to that point, is to be able to do, whether it be just 1 or 2 things or multiple things. If we can do the majority of it in music, if that's what you're wanting to do, then there are ways to do that. It's just you have to find those things sometimes.
Absolutely. And you want to think of what fills the tank too.
Yeah.
You know, because I mean, for me, for this fall, I took a lighter schedule because I was touring so much in the spring and the summer. And in this time, I'm like, man, having the downtime actually allows me to fill the tank and reevaluate some of the things that maybe I haven't had time to even think about. You know, yesterday, I actually set up my recording gear, and I just did a session for a friend for fun, you know, not even for pay or anything like that, but just like, man, this is a good song that could use some drums on it. And I'm just going to mess around with it and just give it as a gift, you know.
Sure.
And doing stuff like that, I really think is also important, you know, being able to take time for the things that you just love, not because you're having to do 5 different side hustles, but just because you want to get back to the basic of, why did I start creating? Why did I get into this field in the beginning? It's because I'm passionate about it. I loved getting to do this.
So do you do drumming sessions for people? Do you track drums for people if they need a drummer for a recording?
You know, I haven't typically done it a ton because I've been on the road so much, but after yesterday, even like as I was driving here this morning, I was like, man, I was listening to the recording in my car, and I was like, I could totally offer this service, you know? Like during the weekdays when I already have all my gear set up in one location. It's not like I'm having to set it up and tear it down every time. Yeah. But definitely, I'm like, yeah, this could totally be a thing, even for this fall while I have downtime.
Sure. And that's just extra income for you, and it's work for you.
Yeah.
And tons of drummers do it. Lots of drummers are, you know, especially with technology now, we can do everything remotely.
Exactly.
You know, over email and whatever. So I want to have you play drums on something of mine. I'm just going to put that on the air and just tell you I would love to do that. That'd be awesome. So if that's something that you're interested in doing, is offering that service to people, just so listeners know, like, I need a drummer. You know, I'm an artist, but I need a drummer who can track for me remotely. And we already know that she's an amazing drummer because she's out playing for Carrie Underwood and, you know, and all these other people. How would you want people to get in touch with you if either they wanted you to drum on a track for them, or maybe somebody needs a drummer to go out and tour with them, and you're wanting, at some point you need, you know, an opportunity to go out and play the drums? How would people want to get in touch with you?
Absolutely, yeah. They can either reach me at my website, eachandmusic.com, or my email address is just info@eachandmusic.com.
The letter E, Chan.
Yep, CHAN music.com.
Awesome. Elizabeth, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This has been so awesome getting just to sit and talk with you. I'm so very grateful that you took time out and invested in this conversation and letting people know, you know, how they can make a living in the music industry by being a drummer or being a road manager, and just sharing your expertise and insight into those things, and continue to have great things in store for you, I know, and we'll have people check you out. And you got a Facebook page as well. They just look you up, Elizabeth Chan on Facebook.
Elizabeth R. Chan, both on Facebook and Instagram. Okay.
Well, again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's awesome. Go listen to Elizabeth on albums and on tour. And you're out touring with Abby Anderson. Is that right? Right? Drumming for her. Yep. Coming up. And that's awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thanks.
Thank you guys so much for joining us today. I really hope you enjoyed my conversation with Elizabeth. She is such a joy to be around. She's so much fun. And obviously she's an amazing drummer and road manager, as you can tell. Be sure to check out Elizabeth's website to get more information on her and her music as well. Also, don't forget, Edenbrook Productions is here to help if you need consulting services via phone call, Skype, or FaceTime. Be sure to let us know how we can help you make a living in the music industry.